Well, it's Monday, November 5th, um, just one day until the election, and I wanted to actually correct a mistake that I made on my last video clip commentary about the election. When I was talking about Republicans and Democrats and third parties, I made a mistake about Governor Gary Johnson, who was on the Libertarian ticket. I was thinking that he was two-time or just governor of Nevada, and to correct myself, I didn't remember correctly that he was two-term governor of New Mexico. And just recently saw an article as to whether or not Gary Johnson can maybe garner at least 1% of the vote. And as usual, I think that's going to be very difficult. That's kind of an obvious, I think, with people like me who just generally keep track a little bit of the news and politics. I'm not religious about watching political shows, but I have seen the debates, and I think it is going to be hard for Gary Johnson, as it is for any third-party candidate, to get any kind of significant amount of the vote. And any people out there who are interested in the liberty movement, the freedom movement, the Constitution, surely don't feel that, I would think, they don't feel that the Romney and Obama Republican Democratic candidates represent them, because in the debates they, as usual, espouse the same old views. So that hasn't changed. It's still the status quo with foreign policy and such. I have to give credit to Obama in that I think he sort of he can play many sides of the fence, and does very well with his beliefs in foreign policy. But you really can't get a handle, I think, at least I can't, on his foreign policy stance. He appears to be the lesser of the two evils, so to speak. But yet he doesn't want to, in a debate, I don't think Obama wants to back down either when it comes to Iran. He wants to appear like the peace candidate, but I think actually he's really not. It seems like Bush and Obama, they were both presidents that, and now it's just even more so of this. Obama is okay with drones and things like that. It seems like abroad or at home. And Romney seems very hawkish on foreign policy, and just using Iran as a really good example. I'm not extremely well versed on history and Iran, and yet I have read a few things over the years concerning Iran, and to me it's the same old story about foreign policy and how these candidates want to, particularly Romney, they want to jump on Iran. They want to keep up these crippling sanctions against Iran, and that seems to be the United States is only one of their biggest policies. Is let's keep in the crippling economic sanctions against Iran, and sanctions, if you look up any kind of definition, or I think economists will say, they are something that the United States uses to implode a country by way of its people, so the people will overturn leaders. But the ironic thing is that the United States is okay with putting in puppet leadership, puppet governments and puppet leaders other countries, overthrowing them in different times in history, or being involved in overthrowing them. And then when things move away from that puppet leader and maybe go away from U.S. interests, then America, again has to consider putting in another puppet dictator. What ends up happening, I think, is that people get doubly hit. They get hit in the beginning by the foreign country or the U.S. country's intervention to place a U.S. backed or interest leader in there. And then when the people don't like the way that leader treats them, that's one area where the people get hit. And then later on down the line, just like in Iraq and Iran, the people pay for it again, because when things aren't going the American way, we implement these sanctions upon them, and the people get hit again. And because these economic sanctions don't cripple the government, they cripple the people. I don't know if there's any debate on that. Maybe there is, But the people are the ones that are going to take the brunt of the suffering, and they're going to get more poor and things like that. So this has been the policy, it seems like, growing all along for decades, in the U.S. maybe longer. That seems to be what our foreign policy is, that we intervene and we continue to intervene and make it worse. So that's an interesting thing. I'd like to maybe end this little clip on talking just a little bit about the Liberty Movement and Ron Paul and Rand Paul. And I don't. It seems to me that Ron Paul seems, to be the real deal and has really not just paid lip service to liberty. I know there's subtleties and nuances that people will disagree with about Ron Paul, that he isn't, maybe his views on 9/11 aren't the same, but we'll discard those just for a second. And I'd like to just mention that the interesting and ironic thing to me is that his son Rand Paul, who I believe put in that legislation to audit the Fed, which that's a good thing. That's one good thing he did. That Senate Bill 202. I think that 36 out of 50 senators have co-sponsored that. I have to check online. And I know in the House, I had a publication here that said back in July, it passed 37 to 98 in the House, the H.R. 459 to audit the Fed, which was put in there by Ron Paul. But the interesting thing is recently I saw Rand Paul on the Peter Schiff show, and it was a good show. I mean, Peter Schiff was actually, I think, trying to, I don't know, maybe help Rand Paul and just point out that he wasn't not like a Judas, but that he was trying to expand the accomplishments in the liberty and freedom movement into his senatorial office in Kentucky. I think he's a senator in, and just by backing Romney, as Rand came out and did, he did make a good point that all the accomplishments have to follow through. That's the way I took it. Into the Republican Party or into the mainstream, and I believe he's correct. But even though he makes a good case, I think most people, I know myself, I thought that was a step backwards. There's a couple step backwards I think that Rand Paul has taken. He seems to be, a very good politician. I mean, from what I can tell, just observe. I don't know. But I think the fact that him and his dad are different, that's normal and natural. But I can't myself side with a couple things that Rand Paul said. And the two things that I don't side with him in that I can think of offhand are what I mentioned with sanctions against Iran and the backing of Mitt Romney. Because on this show that he was interviewed on with Peter Schiff, Rand Paul does make the point that, I think he used the example of the audit of the Fed legislation. He makes the point that we have to continue forward. And so his backing of Romney, I guess, is going forward, so that these accomplishments can be pointed out and heard, and he wants to, be part of a force that's going to put pressure on the Republican Party and so forth. The interesting thing is even though he makes that valid point, I don't think it holds much water. Because let's say President Romney does get in there. I've seen the videos, and I think a lot of people have on YouTube. Romney, although in rhetoric, appears to be much different than the Democrats and Obama. It's just rhetoric. He's not all that different. He doesn't believe in auditing the Fed. He doesn't even mention the Fed. When he has been asked about whether we need a Federal Reserve Bank, he says, yes, we do. So if Romney should become president, which I guess it looks like he could, it's anybody's election, although I still feel Obama might have the edge. But say Romney gets in there, any kind of a political person holding office like Rand Paul, trying to push through, or him and all the others that co-signed with Senate Bill 202, if they try to push through an audit of the Fed, it seems to me that Romney and his background just makes it obvious that Romney would not sign a bill to audit the Fed. He doesn't seem to be interested in that. I don't know if it's that he's influenced, like I assume a lot of politicians are, by the banking sector and by the financial industry, particularly, with the central banks. I assume that somewhere along those areas, central banks are backing, candidates that in wars, it seems like central banks back both sides. I don't think it's really any different with the Republicans and Democrats and the backing that they get from the financial sector, particularly like the central banking sector. So again, if Romney gets in there, I don't think there's any way he is going to support and sign a bill into law to audit the Fed. That's just one thing. He doesn't have those beliefs. He's hawkish on war, it seems to me. He's kind of a warmonger. And this is where I think with Rand Paul, it's showing his step backwards also, because he's different than his dad, and he's not what two people are the same. But I believe Rand Paul is not completely in line with achieving things through the way his dad did, or just through the avenues of total anti-war. Because I think there's never a call for war unless it's been thrust upon you and you have to defend yourself. And that's not what these wars are about. They're aggressive, and they're undeclared. So I'm not trying to say that Rand Paul is like a warmonger, but he's just not in line with, he believes in these sanctions against Iran, which I think that's a step backwards from what I explained earlier. Sanctions don't do anything to help matters. They make things worse for the people. You can't punish the people twice. And he takes a line against Iran with these sanctions that it seems to me that he is more of a believer of Iran's capability to do harm. And I think history shows that Iran can't do anything to us, and they do have the right to pursue nuclear weapons, just as a lot of other countries that have nuclear weapons over there, Pakistan, India, I think they both have nuclear weapons. Why shouldn't Iran? And there's actually no reason why they shouldn't. We should be concerned about what's going on at home here and strengthening our country here. But instead, we our country's foreign policy and its policymakers go off on these tangents that actually undermine things and make things worse for our safety. So, excuse me, I think that to just say the same thing I've been saying all along, I think for the future of the liberty movements and constitutional movements, I don't see Rand Paul totally in line with that. And I think because of those two subjects, those two areas, I would not vote for him. So, but we'll see what happens tomorrow on the election. I don't think it's going to have any bearing on you and me, except that the status quo isn't going to change. And I feel if Obama gets in there, which I think he will, we're just going to continue to go downhill. And Romney, if he gets in there, he might not spend quite as much, but he won't make a dent, I don't believe, in the debt, and he'll spend too much on military, so he's not going to be much better. So I guess if I could say anything to anybody, you vote your conscience, or you vote or not vote. It doesn't really matter. You have the right to do either. But I don't think we're totally represented in the least with these two candidates. I would encourage, I would encourage people to, it'd be nice if you could vote for a choice of none of the above, or you could, I would encourage people to write in, and if they don't like the two candidates, write in your name or vote for a third party like Gary Johnson.